Kansas State makes their first splash in the transfer portal, and it's a good start.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in. I'm your host, Christian Rao. On today's show, we're talking all transfer portal. We'll talk about the women's basketball side as 8 players have committed to return back to the Cats, and then we'll focus on the men's side as well. What are we hearing with portal chatter? And then the first portal commitment for Casey Alexander that did not wear a Wildcat uniform last season, that did play inside college basketball. We'll get to that right here on this show of Locked On Kansas State, bringing you Wildcat coverage like nobody else. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. Brock Weiss coming over from Murray State. He faced Casey Alexander inside the Missouri Valley Conference last year, and it's a piece. It's a role player. And the first commitment for Kansas State out of the portal. Obviously, this will be the 4th player committed to play next season under Casey Alexander in year 1 at Kansas State. But this isn't going to break the bank when you're looking at stat line, if you will, for how he played over his college career. This will be technically his 4th spot of where he is committed. He's committed to Creighton, North Texas, played at Murray State last year, and then now he's going to go to Kansas State. This is somebody who Casey Alexander offered out of high school before his initial commitment to Creighton. Has 2 years of eligibility left, and look, it's I think it's going to be a depth piece, and that's not a bad thing. And when you're looking at how he has to build his roster, not everyone, we have to put our expectations back to where we need to be. Not every portal piece has to be the big splash. And I don't know if we want that, because it didn't work over the last couple years. But I really like Brock Weiss here because he shows a huge upside. And although he didn't have great numbers against Casey Alexander, obviously he saw something that would work with him at Kansas State to make that jump up. He's a 6'10" center. He's got 2 years of eligibility left. Originally, when he came out of high school, out of the state of Tennessee, he was the number 3 prospect in the state. And although he's been a depth option most of the point in his career so far, he's already showing, I think he can show that he can make a step forward, and we'll see how that one goes. Casey Alexander obviously likes it. And again, I have said this, and I'm going to say it again, and we'll probably continue saying it when we add these pieces. I am going to choose to trust Casey Alexander's talent evaluation and roster building, because it has worked so far in his jobs in the mid-major. 10 straight years of 20-plus wins doesn't come just by luck. It comes by building the right talent, and he didn't get a chance to keep some of the really good talent because Power 4 schools would steal them from him. So I'm going to choose to trust Casey Alexander's evaluation here. I think this is a good pick. I think having role players like this, and even if he turns into your 2nd or 3rd center off the bench, having somebody that has the same type of mobility and the same type of playing time, what I mean is same type of mid-major playing time that Casey Alexander has seen, is impressive. As a sophomore, when he did shoot 37% from 3-point, 62% from the field. So that's shooting at an effective clip. Sounds like he didn't shoot enough. Sounds like he didn't get enough playing time if you actually dig into the numbers. But other than that, like when he did play at Murray State, he did it at an effective clip. And I think Casey Alexander, even though if you look at his numbers when he played Casey Alexander, they weren't great. But other than that, I do think that we are getting a good player. I'm excited. This is the thing. This can be a role player. This could be somebody that maybe only gets less than 10 minutes a game. But this is the first official transfer portal piece in the Casey Alexander era. And it's completely different than what we saw in the Jerome Tang era. We already saw the Casey Alexander is completely changing the game. He's brought in 2 freshmen. We don't see that. We haven't seen that in years. It's only been David Castillo or Xavier Wilson. You get 1 year and 1 year, unless you want to call Andre Koshik what it was as a freshman last year, but that's a different international flavor, right? You're bringing in 2 freshmen with Alexander and Hutcherson. Koshik sticking around, young core already. And then you bring in this role player like Brock Weiss, who has 2 years of eligibility. You're bringing in the type of roster so far that can say that these guys are going to stick around. They're not getting a huge NIL war chest. I'm pretty sure that Brock Weiss isn't getting that $1 to $2 million deal that we had to push out for some of these top portal pieces over the past couple of years to hope that maybe it can help you get to the NCAA tournament. But having these multiple years of eligibility, this is why I'm excited. Because look, the upside is there. The upside is absolutely there. And it's not completely going to be, world beaters at the moment, but the upside is there. And Casey Alexander is sticking to his word. And that's why I'm excited. He said he wants to have players that fans can remember year in and year out. And in this world of college athletics, in this world of NIL and transfer portal, as we have learned, as we just saw with All-American PJ Haggerty, who just entered the transfer portal and will be playing with his fifth team in 5 years, that's unheard of. It's unheard of having players stick around and play their entire career at one spot. We thought maybe Taj Manning would do it, but Taj Manning hit the transfer portal, and now we're sitting for years for somebody to finish their entire career at one spot. This at least gives the chance to have a roster built, a roster developed, and then maybe it doesn't happen in year one. Maybe they're not a team that is completely towards the top half of the Big 12 in year one, but you can see progress. And I think that is where you need to lay your head right now. If you can see progress and you can see light at the end of the tunnel to say, okay, this program is heading in the right direction, something for the first time I can say ever since losing to Dusty May's FAU team in the Elite Eight, because it hasn't felt like it's been that way for a very long time. If the peaks and valleys at least feel like they're heading in the right direction and trending upward instead of the peaks and valleys of 2 years ago when you got lucky that you beat Iowa State and Ames, but other than that, you felt like this team really had nothing anyways. If you can at least look that you're heading in the right direction, then I think there's plenty of reasons to be optimistic about what the men's basketball team is going to bring under Casey Alexander over at least the next 5 years while his contract is still sitting here in Manhattan. But it's not going to be the only piece. This is only 4 players. You can't even play a basketball game with the roster that currently is committed to play for Kansas State this next season. So what's next? What are we hearing? There's a lot of portal chatter around. We're still waiting on Casey Alexander to make the next move. Will it be a Belmont player? There's a lot of Belmont players out there right now, and some of them look like they're going to different places. Let's talk about what we're hearing next, right here on Locked On Kansas State.
I'm Clea Butler, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and this is Mazda's Women's Basketball Snapshot, celebrating the work no highlight reel can ever capture. UCLA made history by winning its first NCAA Women's Basketball National Championship, dominating South Carolina 79-51. The Bruins controlled the game from start to finish with elite defense and balanced scoring, finishing the season 37-1. Star center Lauren Betts was named Most Outstanding Player, leading a team effort that capped a 31-game winning streak. Under head coach Corey Close, UCLA secured a landmark title that has been decades in the making. These moments are earned off the clock, those long before the lights ever come on. The sweat, the fakes, the doubt, the scrapes, and coming back for more every time. Mazda puts that same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment. Putting in the work, that defines you. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you.
Welcome back to Locked On Kansas State. Thanks for making it your first listen of the day. If you want even more coverage, Locked On Kansas State, consider going ad-free and join the Everydayers Club. If you are an everydayer, this is the next step. Go to lockedonkansasState.supercast.com, get exclusive Discord access and more, or check the show notes below for more information and become an Everydayer Club member today. Let's talk more transfer portal chatter on the men's side because we got our first piece in Brock Weiss. But what's next, right? What are we hearing? Where's Kansas State's name? Where's Casey Alexander's search going? Well, it's been a little tough connecting the pieces so far, but of course we're going to try. And what we're seeing so far is a few players across the mid-majors. Some of them, most of them are mid-majors, actually. I mean, I don't know if there's a single power school at the moment that I have seen that are Kansas State's getting, I guess you could say, traction in. Unless you consider the Big East a little bit of traction. We'll start with that one first. Butler transfer Jamie Kaiser Jr. has been receiving interest from Kansas State. Now he has a long list of including some SEC schools like Oklahoma, We're seeing some other schools like Georgetown inside the Big East, San Diego State inside the new Pac-12. But he's one that has been shown as certain interest under Kansas State under Casey Alexander. He's a former 4-star recruit. He's been the last 2 seasons at Butler, averaged just under 10 points per game, 4 rebounds and assists. He does have 2 years of eligibility, so it's fitting that role. Kind of the same thing under Brock Weiss, is that a player that has effective shooting, that shoots an effective clip, but has multiple years of eligibility. The more that I think about this, as we talk about, some other things we're hearing, but the more that I'm thinking about this, I would love it if, now that you are not bringing back a good amount of Kansas State players, we're still waiting on some. What happens with Elias Rapiak? What happens with Doreen Buka? What happens with some of these Eurocats, right? They have not officially entered the portal or officially said they're coming back. But neither of those are seniors. Neither of those are last-minute pieces. I'm curious if Casey Alexander doesn't bring a single senior on board. Because what we have seen over the last couple of years with Jerome Tang, and I'm not saying that his strategy is going to be anything about like doing the opposite of Jerome Tang. I think he's going to follow whatever his strategy is. I don't think he's going to worry about the old regime. But what we have seen with Jerome Tang is he brings in a piece with Coleman Hawkins, when he had that free year after coming over as a grad transfer. PJ Haggerty obviously trying to make that NBA jump. He will be playing 1 more year, but he could have made the jump to the NBA if things worked out for him this season. You bring in somebody, and people have loved to use the word mercenary, to try and make that jump to the NBA. They have future aspirations, but that is their primary focus. If Casey Alexander doesn't rely on that, at least in year 1, and focuses on players with multiple years of eligibility remaining, where they can develop, build talent, and again, do his normal pattern, but just not lose them the following year because he's now at a power school, I think that's the best case scenario. So when I look at who these players are getting interest from and seeing that they have multiple years of eligibility, that makes me excited. So we'll see if Jamie Kaiser Jr. is one of them. Again, he's receiving some interest from Oklahoma, from Kansas State, Georgetown, Georgia, Mississippi State. We'll see if he finds himself in Kansas State. Another one, Northwestern transfer Jaden Reed has been in contact with Kansas State as well. Also has a big list of Power 4 schools involved: Auburn, Memphis, Oregon, Texas A&M, Utah has been involved as well. But he, a smaller guard, but he put some points up, 10.1 points per game, 5 assists per game, started all 28 games for Northwestern inside the Big Ten this past season. So the size doesn't really matter. He did it at the Big Ten, and now you're trying to see what he can do at the next step. He's already got Power 4 experience, and he's been reached out from Kansas State. We'll see if he's one of them. South Florida, CJ Brown has heard from Kansas State. He's a 6'2 sophomore. He's averaged 11 points per game, 4 rebounds, 4.7 assists. So it looks like they're focusing a little bit on the guard game that we've heard, trying to find that facilitator, probably to help out and get Andre Kostick that wing. Jalen Alexander, the true freshman, I think can be a true point guard, but I don't know if you want to throw him in the fire on day 1. I think you'd love to have somebody build in front of him. Maybe somebody like a Jaden Reed, who has Big Ten experience, that can help teach and get Alexander ready to go. That could be fun, right? That could be really fun to see if that works out. We'll see what happens. We talk about some of the other Wildcat players that have left, that have entered the transfer portal. One that I was curious if he would stay or not, and we talked about it multiple times on this show over the last couple of weeks, was Taj Manning, because of the fact of, how great he showed his care, how much he cared, even during the rough times with Jerome Tang. There has been reports, Mason Voff of On3 has reported this as well, that he might be going to Iowa State. He might be taking that Farmageddon jump. So not only will he not remain a Kansas State Wildcat, he might go to the other side. That one might hurt. That one might hurt if he goes over there to go to Iowa State and play with TJ Driscoll. As we're continuing talking about former players and former coaches, Matthew Driscoll has officially signed to be an assistant coach under NC State. So that's something there. That's something happening along the lines of what's going on with some former players. And Abdi Bashir Jr. is receiving interest from multiple power schools as well. A lot of people thought maybe he'd have to take that jump back down to the mid-majors because of his injury, but people are really liking the fact that he shot at a very effective clip when he was healthy. And there's talks about him maybe joining Patino's squad over at St. John's. So just something to keep in mind there for some former Cats that were on the squad this past season. What happens with Belmont players, right? What happens with some of those players that we were really focusing on with those Belmont? We obviously lost Tyler Lundblade to Tennessee. We'll see what happens with some of the other ones. Well, Jabaz Jenkins and Ian Dillon both have said they're coming back to Belmont. So those guys are out of the loop. Multiple players have announced they're going to return and play for Belmont. Belmont's a great program. And a lot of people that I've talked to about Casey Alexander, about the Belmont program, really like Casey Alexander's replacement. Not that they didn't like Casey Alexander, but they feel like they're still in good hands. So shout out to that program. But it sounds like Jenkins and Dillon will return. Sam Orm is one of the players that I thought maybe could follow Casey Alexander. There's been reports that maybe he's going to be heading to Nebraska instead of Kansas State. So something to keep an eye on there. There might be a situation. There might be a real world scenario here where Casey Alexander enters year one with Kansas State and doesn't have a single player that he had on Belmont last year, which is usually, I wouldn't say unheard of, but it's unlikely when you make that jump from mid-majors to the power schools. Usually some of them follow you, even when you're jumping from power school to power school. I mean, on the football side, look how many Iowa State players went to Penn State to follow Matt Campbell. Usually you have at least a couple. As of right now, it doesn't sound like any are heading in that direction. Things can ultimately change. There's no doubt about that, but definitely makes you curious about what is going to happen over the next couple weeks. The men's transfer portal closes on April 21st. Still have a ton of things to worry about. What happens? What happens with some of these Wildcats? Doreen Buka, Elias Rapiak, are these guys going to stay? Or are they going to go? They got about 11 days to decide that answer. Of course, we're going to have that news. We'll talk about it here on Locked On Kansas State whenever that happens. But some interesting news along the way. To finish up this segment here before we talk about the women's side, Kansas State officially added 4 new staff members for the men's basketball team, 2 assistants in John Cooper and Phil Cunningham. The chief of staff will be Wes Long, and the GM pick is officially named with Sean Rutigliano. This has been some names that we've talked about rumblings. Now they've officially been added. They were added on Wednesday, posted on social media, posted on the Kansas State basketball website. And these are some picks that have past D1 head coaching experience, some that have good relationships with Casey Alexander. John Cooper was the assistant at UNLV since 2022, so he's had some Mountain West experience. Also, John Cooper's son is one of the top guards in the class of 2027, so looking ahead for recruiting-wise, if he's still on the K-State staff. Currently, according to Rivals, he's the 114th player in Rivals, so very close to a top 100 prospect, 4-star guard. So something to keep in mind moving forward there. Phil Cunningham was the head coach at ULM, Louisiana Monroe this past season. Wes Long was with Middle Tennessee. And Rutigliano was with Belmont staff before this past season. And then before that, he was the head coach at Colby, a D3 school. So you're bringing a lot of head coaching experience, a lot of relationships that have with Casey Alexander. So that's good. It's a good coaching staff, good assistant coaching staff, and hopefully we can see them make a nice step forward. Development, right? Trying to make sure that floor is not super low in year one, making it, try to raise that bar, try to get back to the NCAA tournament, even if they don't go for big splashes in the transfer portal. Something that already hasn't happened. We'll see if that continues over the next couple weeks. Let's shift to the women's side, though, because there's been some great news for Jeff Mittie and the future of the women's basketball squad. They're a lot closer to getting back to the NCAA tournament, especially with the news that came out on Wednesday. Let's talk about that next, right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, this episode of Locked On Kansas State is brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and that one position you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on, you need the right hire. This is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for, whether that's skills, experience, location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's the stat that says it all. In the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show, listeners of Locked On Kansas State, will get a $75 job credit to help you get the job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you've heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. But if you need to hire, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. This episode's also brought to you by Robinhood. What if sports were traded like markets? Well, now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets change the game. It's people moving the action. So when the momentum shifts, you can move with it. I've always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Now you can take care of it play by play. You decide. So trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm. Welcome back to Locked On Kansas State. Thanks for making your first listen. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Bring me Wildcat coverage like nobody else every single day. And going over onto the women's side now, as we continue with this portal chatter, we got some really good news for Jeff Mittie and his crew. 8 players will come back to the Kansas State women's basketball team for next season, committed to the Cats. They put a social post out yesterday, and 8 players are on there. That's pretty good with the ratio of 13 players that could have returned. You're getting 8 back in this transfer portal window. Obviously, the roster at 14 last year, you're losing Tess Heel. And then of those 8, one of them is the new true freshman in Sage Henry, the 3-star out of Arizona. But you're getting Michaela Parks back, who there was a lot of question marks if she was going to return because she did involve in senior festivities. We talked about that in the past. Thought there was a possibility of her maybe leaving or going on. But she's staying and could have a really big role at maybe bringing in some other players. We'll talk about in the future. Ramia White is coming back. Ivania Sekic is coming back. We already talked about Sage Henry. Those 4 players will be with the Cats next season. And then you have the 4 players who had a ton of minutes for Kansas State this past season. Really the other 4, with the exception of Jordan Spicer and Tess Heel, that had the most production for the Wildcats this past season. Nasha Classens, Gina Garcia, Terrence Sides, and Brady Harold will all return to Kansas State for next season. This is huge. This is a big deal for Jeff Mittie and their crew and the coaching staff and this roster, going from a successful run in the NIT, successful run in the Big 12 tournament, having some upsets against Ole Miss, against Texas Tech inside the regular season. And now you're bringing back a ton of production, something that you did not have at all just last year. Really, all you brought back the year before was Terrence Sides and a few other role pieces as well. But going from that historic Sweet 16 run that's now a full year away to going to a team that was rebuilding, obviously, peaks and valleys, the 3rd youngest team in college basketball, and you still stick around. I was screaming for the retention model. I was hoping that they could be able to keep a good amount of these players because I do think they have what it takes to really make a deep NCAA run if they continue to build and work with each other. We've seen that in how great they were in the Big 12 tournament. You add a couple bigger pieces to this mix, and now you have a lot of room to play with the fact that you've bringing back 8, but you have 6 spots to fill. Jeff Mittie has done a really good job in the past with the transfer portal, and I'll be really excited to see what he does in the future. I think it's huge that you're bringing back all the guard play with Gina Garcia, who broke a freshman record for assists for Kansas State history. Obviously, Terrence Sides and her 3-point shooting and what she has been for a leader on this squad. Brady Harold, Nasha Classens has been fantastic pieces as well. And I'd really love to see what Ramia White and Sekic can do in year 2 with this program. We'll see what Sage Henry does as a true freshman. And Michaela Parks obviously is a huge role piece on this team. I'm interested to see the fact that, of course, with Parks coming in, the Jayhawks, Keely Parks, true freshman from last season has entered the transfer portal. She averaged 5.1 points per game this last season. She was ranked as a 5-star recruit out of high school. Well, you just lost a 5-star recruit in Jordan Spicer, and now Keely Parks is in the portal. Could she be making that quick trip from Lawrence to Manhattan? That'd be a really interesting way to make that jump. I'll take that. Look, I'll take the Dylan Edwards for Keely Park trade all day if that's what we're going for when it comes to switching schools for that, for sure. If you want to just close the book on this transfer portal for who's leaving based on we've got the commitments, obviously Tess Heal's leaving, eligibility, not transfer portal, which is going to be playing pro in Australia. And then 5 players for Kansas State will enter the transfer portal on the women's basketball side. Jordan Spicer, obviously the big one. A lot of people didn't see that one coming, and that's a big deal. And then you have Isela Arenas, Janessa Cotton. Those are 2 ones that were kind of expected, just based on how the last couple games ended for Kansas State and how everything went down. Anaya Foy was one that was not really expected either, but that one also happened. That one came out pretty early, so you might have forgot about that one. We talked about that one in the past, and that's big. You know, losing Foy, losing Spicer. There's no doubt about that still stings because you're bringing in such a big freshman class and you want to make sure that you can build that retention. And I was really concerned when Foy and Spicer hit the portal, but 8 of them sticking around is really important. And then finally, Alexa Hess decided to enter the portal as well. So that puts it at 5, moving on from 6 players from last year's roster. And that's where it will leave you going into the new season. I have faith in Jeff Mittie for what he's done in the transfer portal, for what he's done over the past couple seasons, bringing in Tamira Poindexter, bringing in Gabby Gregory, bringing in Tess Heal. There's been a lot of really big wins for Jeff Mittie over the years in this new portal era. He's done a much better job recruiting talent in the transfer portal than what the men's side has done in the Jerome Tang era. So I'm curious to see how he decides to build this one up for the near future. I think they got to focus on another 3-point shooter to help get some slack off of Terrence Sides and to replace the production of Jordan Spicer. And then I think you got to focus on bigs and down low and focus on rebounding and focus on defense. If they do that, this team will be not only just a team that makes the NCAA tournament, but runs as one of the better teams inside the Big 12 all season long. Some of the teams inside the Big 12 on the women's basketball side that were towards the top lost a ton of production. TCU being one, losing a lot in the transfer portal. Iowa State losing a lot as well. We'll see how they rebuild, but I have a lot of faith in Jeff Mittie over this offseason. The portal for the women's side closes on April 20th. All that really means is that players just can't enter anytime after that. Players can still commit anytime afterwards, but it sounds like we have closed the book on who's actually leaving for Kansas State, unless some kind of tampering happens, because we've just got the commitment graphic for 8 Wildcats for next season. That's going to wrap it up for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Please like the video. Please subscribe. We'll see you back here next time right here on Locked On Kansas State.